the Watchers, or the fallen angels, the fallen ones, the Nephilim, they were apparently angels. So their mission was to come to Earth and watch the sons and daughters of man and watch over them, and take care of them and teach them things. But they got a bit horny. They say that the sons of gods and the daughters of man, which is Adam, they fell in love with this flesh, basically, of the females, and they mated. And they apparently had offspring, and these offspring were known as the Nephilim, which were known as huge giants. And it is spoken about in the Bible, also in the Book of Enoch, which is an interesting read. It all sort of connects. And even there was in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there also was another book found missing, which was the Book of the Giants. So all of this talks of this time. So the Nephilim they were basically the offspring, and they mated, and they had huge, giant, powerful offspring. And it's said that there's two kinds of stories, as always, perspective and polarity. The stories that they were very bad, and they taught humans how to war and battle, and they enslaved them, and they taught them abortion and stuff like this, and the bad stuff and greed. And there's another side that they went and built, and they were known as the great builder race also as well. And they taught astronomy, helped build these temples, stone circles that we find scattered all across the world. And they were people of peace and teaching knowledge, but it was maybe forbidden knowledge. Who knows? It sounds to me like some kind of open contact in a way. There was a time when beings of a higher consciousness, let's say, maybe came, and they maybe interfered with humanity. We hear this in the Sumerian texts about all in our DNA and being created in that sense. And this could be the stories that go back to this. So, the Nephilim is a very fascinating subject. And a very interesting story, and it's not the only story, as you well know, going on to giants. But my belief would be it's probably one of the oldest, what goes back to some kind of origin story of when something begun on Earth, and that may have been, but before, it says that the giants were realmed before the Great Flood, and some survived afterwards. So that would take it at least, could be 20,000 years we could be talking. But when you look at the Sumerian kings list and the Egyptian kings, and some of these go back thousands of years, they tell us that the part of the kings list they know is exact, which they know about, and they can find records. And it gets to these crazy times where some of them are ruling for Gilgamesh, which we'll talk about later. 120 years he ruled for. And there's other ones, 250 years, 350. If you go back on this time, we could be talking hundreds of thousands of years, if that timeline is correct. But scholars say that part of it's correct, but the other bit, they just made the other part of it. So they had a king's list that is exact, precise. But the older it gets, they just made that up because it doesn't fit into the narrative that we believe on planet Earth. So I hope that's something about the Nephilim. Don't know if you've got anything to add, bro.
Yeah, it's kind of like the story of David and Goliath. Even the Bible talks about giants. And to see this coming up in the Bible is, it's not just once that it comes up, because Goliath was said to have fought David, and David killed Goliath. Well, David also, him and his servants, what I would take as his other warriors, they were said to have killed Goliath's brothers. So that there goes, Goliath had brothers, and Goliath's mother, I believe her name was Orphia. He had a mother. And so it starts showing. And the father, he had a father, he had brothers, he had relatives. So that goes on to, were they Nephilim? Because there's so many different giants. And then they were all slain. So, and then even in the story there, it's very, contradicting, because you'll hear about David through the Bible, through everything, that he killed Goliath. And then you have another story that says that Elana was the man that killed Goliath. And I started looking up some of that, and I was like, well, wow, I find that very interesting, because they said that they wrote it down that way because it looked like, an underdog, David, somebody much smaller, was able to kill him. That's how strong the Lord, and how much to have the Lord's faith, and how strong you can be. And they showed more of an underdog story. But it does go on to say that there were other giants. There was his brothers, and then supposedly his brothers got killed. So now you have all of these giants and these Nephilim, I would think. And so what happened, once they were being killed, did they take off? Because the Philistines talked about, because Goliath was one of the Philistines. Did they get pushed back into caves? I mean, were they used as instruments for battle? I mean, it sure seemed like it, because here's Goliath that's taken on a whole army. And then you have stories of giants in caves. Then all of a sudden they get pushed back to these caves. So yeah, it's kind of like the Nephilim with the Bible. I mean, the Bible tells stories, like you're saying, Nephilim, you have the, you know, their fathers were the Watchers, and then Nephilim had the Anakim. So then you just have all these different stories of giants, even coming from the Bible. You want to key in on that too?
Another thing I would add to it, does seem like some kind of bloodline or ancient bloodline for sure. And we do hear about this a lot, these special bloodlines. And I wanted to say the Watchers, or the fallen angels, the fallen ones, it says in the book of Enoch, there was 200 of them that come down. So that's a fair number in a sense, you know. So then so they would have been the pure DNA on that sense. And then they mated with the flesh of the daughters, which created these Nephilim giants. So, you know, there could be a very, what I'm saying there could be a very spectrum of bloodline there. Not so because there was 200 of these beings, we don't know what these beings were, you know. Was that different species? I mean, this is what I'm getting at. Was this some kind of high frequential being, which people call angels? But then how would they mate? You know, why would they fall for the flesh if they're, you know, balls of light? It doesn't make too much sense. So it sounds like they might have been biological, is what I'm getting to. And if there was 200 of these fallen angels, they might not have been one species of, like, say, 200, I don't know, reptilians as an example. It might have been different, and they had different offspring. You know, that would make some kind of sense. But yeah, it's definitely some kind of bloodline. And we got stories from way back now to the start of so-called man, and we've got coming all the way up to modern days, we found. And so I know Scotty was the same as me. It's one of these subjects, I'm sure if anyone's looked into it, that you can just keep going. It's a rabbit hole that doesn't end, and there's a lot of tangible evidence, and it's quite clear that certainly, you know, we have gigantism anyway coming back in the DNA and throwing out. So it's not that much of a crazy idea. But yeah, I just wanted to add that, Scott. It was 200 of them was dropped down, so that could, you know, that was something interesting, I thought.